welcome to another weekly meal prep where we try to get everything as ready as possible for the weekdays. And basically, I just try to prep all of the proteins pretty much, and occasionally there'll be a few sides I don't tackle in my main meal prep where I will put those things on the stove or in the oven whenever it's time to eat that meal. So Monday we are going to be making this amazing cashew chicken with rice, salad, and homemade salad dressing. So this might just be the winner of this week's meal prep as far as my favorite meal in the house. I think my family might have another one in this, but for me, this was so yummy. I already love ordering cashew chicken when we're out somewhere, and so having this healthy, homemade, easy option is just great. So we're gonna start out by cutting up 2 different colored bell peppers. I recommend using yellow and red, or potentially 2 reds might work as well. And then you're going to take some broccoli. You want like 2 nice crowns of broccoli, and I like to cut these into little florets. Normally, I'm not that picky about my broccoli, but in this particular dish, you want them to be very bite-sized and just really go along with the size of the other veggies that we're going to put into the dish. So I took my time and I really just cut the broccoli into nice sized pieces. Now we're going to be taking some mushrooms, and with this size of a mushroom that I have here, I went ahead and cut them into 4 pieces. And this whole flavor combination is so good, and you guys are going to really be blown away with how easy the sauce is for this. We're going to be making it in the blender, and it takes only a few ingredients, but the flavor punch that it gives is just delicious. Now, I chose to use a chicken thigh for the protein. You could do a chicken tender or a chicken breast, but honestly, I feel like the chicken thigh is what helped the likability for me. The texture factor and the flavor factor, it just really went so well with the dressing and all of the things that went into the stir fry. So I just used a little bit of salt to kind of season the chicken, and I had that frying while I mixed up the dressing, or the sauce, I guess. So we have some rice vinegar, we have liquid aminos, which can be also soy sauce. We've got some raw ginger, and we have some garlic cloves. We're throwing all of this stuff into the blender, and then I'm also putting in some sesame oil, and then I'm going to be using a sweetener alternative. I try to make a lot of low sugar dishes just because for myself, I can't eat a lot of sugar, so you could just put regular cane sugar into this as well, or even another alternative like honey or maple syrup. And then you're going to add in some red pepper flakes also, and you can add xanthan gum, or I have another thickener. I will leave it listed in the description box where I put the recipes or recipe links for you guys to find. I get comments on almost every meal prep video that people don't know where the recipes are, and so that's why I repeat it. I feel like in every meal prep or freezer prep or whatever I'm cooking, the recipes are below unless something goes wrong in my uploading process and I totally forget to put them there. And on that occasion, you all have been great at reminding me to put them in there. So thank you so much for all of my loyal viewers, for sure. So we're just mixing together the chicken, we're mixing together the sauce and the veggies, and then we also added in some chopped cashews, and I did that off screen, but I did just chop up some whole cashews. Next, we're going to use some homemade broth and some parboiled rice just to have a good rice to put the stir fry on top of. My favorite addition to Monday's meal is Graza. They are the sponsor of today's video. Graza makes top-notch olive oil at an affordable price. First, the aesthetics of the packaging is spot on. First, I'm using Drizzle, which is the punchier extra virgin olive oil that I'm going to be using in a little salad dressing for Monday's meal. Unlike Sizzle, you use Drizzle raw for finishing dishes, and you can even dip stuff into it. This is my personal choice for going across my greens and salads. I absolutely love how they put their oil into these squeeze bottles. It's so simple to apply it to my dishes and easy, no mess, no fuss. You know I'm all about making sure easy cleanup and make sure that the oil gets where I want it to go in my cooking. Graza olive oil tastes incredibly good. It's made from one kind of olive from one place in Spain, and it is super fresh. The harvest date is actually right on the bottle for you to check out. Next, we have Sizzle, which is a more mellow everyday cooking oil that's fantastic for stir frying those veggies and adding into your recipes. And I love, if you run out of olive oil, there's no need to buy a new bottle. Simply grab a refill can from their website or your local Whole Foods for an easy way to refill your bottles. Thanks again to Graza for sponsoring today's video. Head to the link in my description box to get 10% off your order using code Adeline10 at checkout. Moving on to Tuesday, we are going to make the easiest ground beef stroganoff you guys have ever seen, I promise. This only has a couple ingredients. It's so simple, budget friendly because we don't have a lot of extra ingredients, and you may even have the things in your refrigerator to make this right now. So we will be serving that with some noodles that I will cook the night we eat this meal, and along with the beef stroganoff and the noodles, we're going to have some mashed potatoes and stir-fried green beans, which we will be prepping as well. So I just took some ground beef, about 2 pounds, and then we cut up a onion nice and small, diced it nice and small, and then we're also going to be dicing the mushrooms really small as well. We're going to add all of that together. We're going to let the beef brown before we add in the mushrooms and onions, and then we're just going to let everything simmer and all of those flavors really combine. And while this was all happening, I actually peeled some potatoes off camera. We got some real life here. They started to oxidate a little bit. We had a little bit of browning happening, but you know what? They're going to get cooked and mashed and nobody will ever know. So I just cut these all into a uniform size and put them in to my one of my Dutch ovens, and I'm just gonna cook these up on my other stove. A lot of you may have noticed I've started using a burner in this prep area I have because it's just easier to show you all the recipes when I'm filming recipes just from all angles, and it's a little simpler than using my regular stovetop. But I just put the potatoes on my regular stovetop and let those cook up and get nice and soft. Now we're gonna dive into this crazy simple beef stroganoff. So you're going to take some cream cheese. Again, these recipes will be below. I actually just took my cream cheese out of the refrigerator. I didn't even soften it, but I did just cut it in sort of a grid pattern and then put those cubed pieces in with the beef, onion, and mushroom mixture just to kind of spread it throughout, and it really melted super quickly, so I didn't feel like I had to have softened cream cheese to put into this. Next, we're gonna pour across some beef broth. I do make my own and can it. I just find it to be really delicious to be able to make my own, and so I just used a little bit of that, and then I also added in some W sauce. You guys know what it is, and I have the hardest time saying it, but it's Worcestershire. You can let me know in the comments. You guys always do. Every time I say this word, you tell me the way I should be saying it. The struggle is real, guys. So we're adding some water, a little bit of cream, and some sour cream to this dish. So easy. And then you're just going to stir everything together and let it really just simmer. You don't want it to be too high heat just because it can do funny things to that sour cream. It can make it separate a little bit. So you definitely want to stay on a low heat. I mean, at this point, our meat is already cooked. So you may want to turn your heat down just a bit. And then I just put it into a container in the refrigerator, and I will be heating that up to pour over the pasta when we eat it. But like I said, we have mashed potatoes and stir-fried green beans. So I put those green beans on the pan or in the pan and put some oil with them. And while they were sort of stir frying up, I went ahead and did my 3-ingredient mashed potatoes. Honestly, this is just my go-to. This is what I do with my mashed potatoes at this point. I do the butter, I do the sour cream, and then I do the buttery steakhouse seasoning. Love, love, love that stuff. I know some of you have really been able to discover that seasoning. It is a match made in heaven for your veggies, including mashed potatoes. And then I like a good old hand masher. I know some people will use an immersion blender, but for our regular mashed potatoes, this is just the texture we like. And then I will add a 4th ingredient of a little bit of milk if I feel like it needs to be a little bit mushier. So I'm going to be storing this in a container, and all of this, like I said, will be really simple to reheat. The Stroganoff I will put into a frying pan and just heat it up with a little bit of oil. It'll come right back to life. And the mashed potatoes I'll just put back into my cast iron, maybe with some extra milk. And again, that will come back to life. And it's just so easy to reheat everything. So we are moving on now to Wednesday. Wednesday, we're going to be doing a loaded sweet potato bar, Brussels sprouts, and a tossed salad that I will make the night we eat this. Now, I have talked about how we like to make loaded potatoes almost weekly. That is a staple meal in our house. If it's not every week, it's every other week. We usually use a ground pork, which is what I'm going to be preparing today. And it's just such a simple meal. But one thing we've been starting to do is swap out the white potatoes, red potatoes, or baking potatoes for a sweet potato. They just have more fiber and nutrients, and it's just something I'm trying to focus on using in our place of our potatoes. We do eat mostly gluten-free in our house, not 100%. We don't have any allergies, just sensitivities. And so potatoes are a huge staple. If you guys haven't noticed, in my meal prepping, a huge staple in our house, along with rice to some degree and occasionally pasta. Pasta is not something that we eat every week for sure, but because we don't do a lot of wheat products, it just makes a difference in how I'm preparing things and cooking for sure. So as you saw, I just cut these Brussels sprouts into 4 pieces because they were like pretty big. Sometimes they're a little smaller than this, and I'll just cut them in half. And then I toss that in the oil, and I'm just putting it on the cookie sheet with some onion powder or garlic powder and a little bit of that buttery steakhouse seasoning. And then I just roast them up until they start getting a little crunchy looking. Then I know they're ready. I'll pull them just before I normally would if we were going to eat this right away, just because then I can throw them in the oven to reheat them when we're ready to eat this. So now we have our ground pork. I know sometimes I say sausage, but technically I guess this would just be ground pork. And I am grabbing some of my pepper relish. This is sweet pepper relish I make in the summertime. I will be sharing it this summer. And then I do a little drizzle of barbecue sauce. A lot of times I like to use my homemade barbecue sauce, but I was out of it this day and I just didn't want to take the time to stop and make a batch of barbecue sauce. So I just used what we had on hand and what we had left in the refrigerator from some ribs we had made this past weekend. So we're just going to store that in a container and everything is ready to go. I did want to give you all a few toppings that we like to use on our baked potatoes. So we will do the ground pork, feta cheese or cheddar cheese, bacon bits, jalapenos, sour cream, just loading them up, and they are just too delicious like that. Okay, so Thursday we're going to do a twist, a really healthy twist on shepherd's pie along with roasted carrots, and then we'll be pulling out some of the sweet corn that we put in the freezer in the summertime. So I'm starting out by giving you guys a tip that I do say here and there, and that is to use what you have. Instead of going and buying new ingredients, just substitute for things that are already in your refrigerator. And I happen to have a lot of celery that was on the verge of needing to be something to be done with it. So I decided to go ahead and use the celery. And a lot of times I would do like celery, carrots, and onion in a shepherd's pie type dish. But because I had all of this celery, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make it the star of the show and then make some roasted carrots on the side. So we still have kind of the same flavor combinations. But what we're going to do to make a real twist on the shepherd's pie idea, or cottage pie. I know, whenever I talk about this subject, you all, especially those of you that are from Europe, love to correct me. I understand we use different names for different things and it may be incorrect, but that's okay. That's what I grew up calling it. But instead of doing mashed potatoes on top of the beef, and yes, it's ground beef. That's why a lot of people would call it cottage pie, I guess. If it's cottage pie, if it's cottage pie, it means ground beef. If it's shepherd's pie, it means ground lamb, I think. So we are going to go ahead and cook up that cauliflower. Now, to make mashed cauliflower, my biggest tip that I've learned after many years of making mashed cauliflower is to cook the cauliflower in the largest chunks possible. The smaller you break the pieces, the more water you're going to have going on, and everything gets really mushy really, really fast. My favorite way, actually, to make mashed cauliflower is to put the entire head into my pressure cooker and cook all of it at one time, and it just cooks the whole head. It's so cool. You don't even have to cut into the head or anything. But to be honest, I was just feeling a little bit do I say the word lazy? I don't think lazy, but I was just feeling, didn't feel like dragging out my big pressure cooker. It's in the bottom back corner of my pantry right now, and I just decided, since I already had my Dutch oven out to cook other things through this prep, we were just gonna go with that. So that's what I did. So to do the roasted carrots, I just peeled them, cut them. I'm cutting them into strips. I'm going to be throwing them into this mixing bowl so that they can be coated with the oil as well. Now, one really big tip I will give you when it comes to roasting carrots in this way is to not coat your onions in oil. A lot of times it burns the onions before the carrots are tender. So what I've learned to do is just coat the carrots, and I put them onto a lined baking sheet, and I tried to spread them out into one nice size layer, and then I will sprinkle, I don't know if we sprinkle onions, but I spread the onion slices over the carrots after I'm done spreading them out and all of that, so that they don't get a bunch of oil on them, and then they don't burn, which is nice because then they give you a nice tender onion to eat with your carrots instead of a burnt onion on top of your carrots. I love sheet pan meals, anything roasting on a sheet pan. I just personally love the flavor of that, and so I tend to do a lot of roasting, and doing one pan meals is one of my favorite things as well. And the next thing I get to add to this pan of the beef and the veggies is my tomato paste that I made this past year. If you've ever made tomato paste, you know why I am thrilled to use this ingredient, why it just is so fun to use tomato paste that you've made, because it takes literal days to make tomato paste. If you want it as thick as store-bought tomato paste, it takes so long to cook it down, to condense the tomatoes and the tomato juice into a paste. And it also takes a lot of tomatoes to do this as well. So I had done a nice sized batch of this past year, and for whatever reason, I just haven't had that many recipes to use the tomato paste in. So it was exciting to get this off of my cellar shelf and use it and stir it in, and just, yeah. just knowing how hard I worked to make the tomato paste is just fun to see it going into a recipe. So along with that, we're going to do some parsley, salt, pepper, some beef broth. Sorry, I had to think for a second. And we're going to just let all of those things really simmer and condense down just a bit. And then we are just going to recreate the mashed potatoes just with mashed cauliflower. And to do mashed cauliflower, I find the easiest way to get it into a more mashed consistency is to use my immersion blender, and it's really simple. It takes no time at all, and I can throw my immersion blender end in the dishwasher because that is something I do calculate a lot when it comes to the meals that I make, is how big of a mess is this going to make, because there is a lot of cleanup that goes into cooking, and that is one of the big reasons I love to meal prep, is simply because I can make a disaster of a mess in a couple hours prepping lots of meals, and then I get it all cleaned up, and then throughout the week my cleanup in the kitchen is so minimal. I can focus on making breakfast, I can focus on lunches, the other odds and ends that happen in my kitchen, and the big bulk of the dinner meal preps messes are not there. And I think that that's really where I tend to fall behind, is whenever the dinner mess is not entirely cleaned up until the next day, and then you're waking up to a huge mess and a big pile of dishes. So being able to prep things for dinner helps this so incredibly much. And another thing I wanted to ask you all is, what types of meals, and maybe I feel like I do a big variety here on my channel, but what types of meals do you tend to cook the most? Is it oven baked meals? Is it skillet meals? Do you grill a lot? Do you do slow cooker meals a lot? There's just so many different styles of meals out there, and I try to give a good variety here just simply because I personally cook a good variety of those different styles of meals. But if there's one that you would like to see more of, or you feel like I don't do that often, definitely let me know in the comments. The one we probably eat the least of is slow cooker meals. There just is not that many that I have found that we have just really loved. I think it's mainly because of texture. A lot of times the slow cooking process really makes things very mushy and soft, and I think we prefer things to be more like roasted or grilled, and I think that's why I shy away from a lot of slow cooker meals. But then there are certain things I do really like to do in the slow cooker. For example, the number one thing I do in the slow cooker is doing pot roast, where I put a nice beef roast into the slow cooker and with some carrots and potatoes and onions, and it's good to go as an entire meal in one spot. Or soups. Soups is another thing that sometimes I will do in a slow cooker. But other than that, we definitely prefer more like skillet meals, oven meals, and grilling and roasting things for sure. Okay, so you can see how I'm pulling this all together here. So you just layer the meat layer on the bottom, and then I'm just putting the mashed cauliflower on the top. If you are someone like myself who eats things that are very low starch, low sugar a lot of the time, this is a great alternative to mashed potatoes going on top of your shepherd's pie or cottage pie, whatever you'd like to call it. And then I also pulled out my roasted carrots as well. So we are sailing on to Friday. Friday is a busy day in our house a lot of times, especially with certain homeschool activities we have going on. So having something ready to go or ready to pop in the oven is so convenient. So we are going to be doing a baked chicken Alfredo. with a side of broccoli that I will make once I pop this in the oven on Friday. And then also we will do a side salad. You guys might notice that the last couple preps that I have been mentioning doing side salads because we've just simply been trying to get more and more greens into our diet. And one thing that we've really been enjoying, and I don't know the technical name for it, but it's called crunch lettuce or crunchy lettuce. And it just stays more crunchy than a lot of other lettuce I've seen. And then to do the pasta in the baked Alfredo, we're going to use the Jovial gluten-free pasta. That is our favorite brand. It's almost undetectable that it's gluten-free. It is so delicious. It's definitely not the cheapest gluten-free pasta, but it's so worth it. And like I said, we don't eat tons of pasta all the time, so having that in my pantry, and then when we do have pasta, it's like knock it out of the park, yum pasta. So that is what I'm going to be using for this. Again, I have that cooking on my other stovetop while I was preparing all of this. So I'm just putting the chicken in the skillet at a medium heat. I'm just cooking it like that with some salt and pepper, and I'm going to be pulling that off here in a minute. But while it was cooking, I went ahead and I shredded up my mozzarella cheese and my Parmesan cheese, and I will leave the recipe, the original recipe on Pinterest, linked below, that I have followed loosely for this. But to be honest, I've made this for years, and so I tend to just eyeball things and just do my very best to kind of watch consistency and things like that. And sometimes I add in sour cream, sometimes I add in cream cheese, again going with that whole thing of like whatever I have on hand is what gets thrown into the dish. So this day I just went ahead and followed the recipe more so because I did end up putting the ingredients for this on my grocery list. So I was able to just grab the Parmesan and the mozzarella. So we're going to start out by taking the chicken off of the pan, and then I just took a nice sized block of butter and I'm just melting that around. It kind of helps to get the little bits of chicken that are left in the bottom of the skillet. And then I'm grabbing my all-purpose gluten-free flour. I'm just going to shake a nice amount over that, and you want a whisk as you're working with this. Again, I didn't do exact measurements, but in the recipe linked below, there are measurements for you. And I believe she just has regular flour in the recipe, but you can definitely use gluten-free in place of that. And then I just went ahead and poured in some almond milk. You could use regular milk. It's not really one way or the other. We just tend to have almond milk on hand because we like to drink that as a beverage. And so I'm just whisking that in and letting it sort of become a creamy consistency. And then I'm also going to be adding in some heavy cream as well. That's just going to amp up that creaminess. And I'm also going to be putting in some garlic powder. Now, the garlic powder was a bit of a cheat, I'm not gonna lie. I was running out of steam. You know, this was like a big meal prep and I was getting tired and I just did not feel like mincing garlic. But most of the time when I make baked Alfredo, whenever you're in that butter stage and you're melting the butter at the beginning, that's when I will put in the minced garlic. And it's so good. We love garlic in our food. But yeah, it was a long day and I had a lot going on besides meal prepping, and I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna skip out on doing the real deal garlic and we'll go for garlic powder. So I'm just mixing in the Parmesan cheese and about half of the mozzarella, and then I'm gonna dump in the pasta, and we're going to get all of this stirred together so that it can kind of melt. You're going to reduce your temperature, by the way, at this point fairly well because you don't want burnt cheese on the bottom of your pan. And while I have this on low, I'm just going to cut the chicken into nice bite-sized pieces. Now, I personally prefer to use our smoker/grill to make the chicken for this, but this worked out well this day. Like I said, I was just trying to make everything as simple as possible. Another thing you can do is get a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store to make baked Alfredo like this too. There is a lot of simple ways to make healthy meals, homemade meals, and do it budget friendly, do it easy, not overcomplicated, and even being able to use ingredients that you already have around, finding substitutes. And a lot of that has come from me being around my mom, being around other people that cook as well, talking to people, other women, moms, wives that do a lot of cooking as well, and they give great ideas. So definitely the next time that you're around somebody else that cooks, ask them questions, ask them for some of their best tips if you are newer to cooking, because that is the best way to learn from people that already know, already have explored the world of cooking. And you'll find really easy, simple substitutes. Another thing you can do, honestly, if you don't have something in a recipe, is take to Google what you could possibly swap out for that item, and you're going to get a lot of really great ideas. That is just one way to stay in budget when it comes to your cooking, and also to not waste things and to use things up that you might already have around. So that is this entire week's meal prep. Honestly, this was such a simple but yummy prep. I was so thrilled with all of the meals. They just all turned out so great. And if you're totally new here, I'd love it if you subscribed and stuck around. I have a lot of different types of videos here on my channel beyond meal prepping, and meet me in the comments. I love responding to your comments. Give this video a like, and I'll see you all in the next video.